It started as just another evening shift. Detective Ethan Cole had worked homicide for over a decade, and in that time, he had learned one universal truth. Evil rarely announces itself. It seeps through the cracks, hides in plain sight, and sometimes, it whispers through the phone. The 911 call came in at 9:37 p.m. A woman's voice, trembling but controlled. "There's something wrong with my neighbor's house." Ethan glanced at his partner, Detective Lisa Navarro, who was already pulling up the call details on the screen. The woman's name was Margaret Lawson, 64 years old, lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where people water their lawns at the same time every morning and wave to each other out of habit. "What's the emergency, ma'am?" the dispatcher had asked. "Their lights. They're always on. Every night, until past midnight. But tonight, the house is completely dark. And their dog, it won't stop barking." Ethan frowned. A dark house and a barking dog weren't exactly cause for alarm. But something in Margaret's voice, a strained urgency, made the hairs on his arms rise. Lisa clicked on the address. "Cole, look at this." Ethan leaned in, his stomach tightening as he read the system alert. 3 months ago, this same house had been the subject of another 911 call from a young woman. The call had cut out mid-sentence. And the woman? She was never found. Lisa met his gaze. "We need to check this out." Ethan grabbed his badge, heart pounding, because something told him this wasn't just a false alarm. Detective Ethan Cole wasn't the type to believe in gut feelings. At least, that's what he told himself. He'd spent 15 years on the force, first as a beat cop, then climbing the ranks to homicide detective. He built his career on facts, evidence, and procedure, not hunches, not instincts. But deep down, he knew the truth. Some things don't make sense until they do. He had learned that the hard way. Born and raised in the city, Ethan had grown up in a working-class neighborhood where sirens were just part of the background noise. His dad had been a mechanic, his mom a school teacher. They weren't perfect, but they taught him one thing that stuck. Your job isn't to play hero. Your job is to show up when no one else does. That lesson hit home when he was 16, the night his best friend, Jordan, disappeared. Jordan had called him that night, voice low, scared. Ethan had ignored the call. Jordan was never seen again. The case went cold, like so many others. And Ethan, he never ignored a call again. His role in the community. Ethan wasn't the kind of cop people feared when he walked into a room. He was the one they trusted. At the diner near the precinct, he was Detective Cole, black coffee, no sugar. At the corner store, he was the guy who checked in on old Mr. Reynolds every night after his wife passed. And at home, in a small apartment that always smelled faintly of burnt toast and coffee, he was just Ethan, a man who still kept a framed picture of Jordan in his desk drawer. He worked the hard cases, the ones that kept people up at night, the ones that stuck with him long after the reports were filed. And lately, the ones that started with 911 calls just like this. Lisa, his partner, often teased him for his intensity. "You act like every case is personal." Ethan never responded to that, because sometimes they were. Why this case feels different. As he and Lisa drove through the quiet suburban streets toward the address from the call, Ethan couldn't shake a feeling he knew better than to ignore. This wasn't just another check-in. This wasn't a false alarm. Margaret Lawson had noticed something off about her neighbors. Ethan had learned one thing about people over the years. When someone like Margaret gets a bad feeling, they're usually right. And this time, he wasn't going to ignore the call. The street was quiet. Too quiet. Detective Ethan Cole had been to hundreds of neighborhoods like this. Neatly trimmed lawns, cars parked in driveways, houses built in perfect symmetry. The kind of place where everyone pretended they knew their neighbors, but kept their secrets behind closed doors. The address from the call belonged to Daniel and Rebecca Whitmore, a couple in their mid-40s with no prior incidents. Ethan scanned the house as he stepped out of the cruiser. The porch light was off. The windows were dark, blinds drawn tight. The only sound was the distant bark of a dog. Margaret's, most likely. Ethan exchanged a glance with Lisa. Something felt wrong. Margaret, the caller, was already outside, standing on the edge of her lawn, wringing her hands. I know it sounds silly," she stammered as Ethan approached, "but they're always home at this hour. And their dog." She motioned toward the Whitmore's house. "They usually keep it inside, but it's been out there, barking, since sundown." Ethan nodded, his gaze drifting to the side yard. That's when he saw it. A single shoe. It lay half buried in the damp grass, just beyond the Whitmore's driveway. A woman's shoe. Red. Small. His stomach tightened. You see that? Lisa muttered, following his line of sight. Ethan didn't answer. He was already moving. As he approached the house, the unease in his guts solidified into something sharper. The front door was slightly ajar. A sliver of darkness yawned behind it, like a mouth waiting to swallow him whole. Lisa reached for her weapon. Ethan raised a hand. Wait. He pushed the door open a little further. The hinges groaned, the sound slicing through the silence. Inside, the house was completely dark, but the smell hit him first. Coppery. Stale. Heavy. Ethan knew that scent far too well. Blood. And that's when the real horror began. Detective Ethan Cole had been in too many crime scenes to count, but something about this one felt different. Maybe it was the eerie quiet, the way the night air pressed down on him, thick and unmoving. Or maybe it was the faint, unmistakable metallic scent of blood hanging in the air. He and Lisa stood just inside the Whitmore's front door. Everything in the house was still, too still. No hum of a refrigerator, no creak of settling wood. Even the dog had gone silent. Ethan's hand hovered near his holster. Lisa took a cautious step forward. Ethan, this is giving me a bad feeling. You and me both, he muttered. Then he noticed the first sign that something was very wrong. 1. The living room. Signs of a struggle. The Whitmore's living room was pristine, except for one thing. A glass coffee table stood at the center, modern and sleek. Everything on it was perfectly arranged. A stack of magazines, a ceramic bowl of potpourri. Everything, except for a single overturned wine glass. Red wine had splattered across the floor, dark droplets staining the white carpet. At first glance, it might have looked like an accident. A casual spill, but Ethan knew better. A broken shard lay near the table's edge, its jagged tip glistening under the dim hallway light. Someone had knocked that glass over in a hurry. Lisa crouched near the stain. There's no attempt to clean it up. If this was just a spill, they'd have grabbed a towel. Ethan nodded. And look at this. He gestured toward the hallway leading further inside. There's no trail, no footprints. If someone walked through, there'd be smudges, which meant whoever knocked it over never left this room on their own. His stomach twisted. They were already too late. 2. The clock. A stop moment in time. Ethan turned his attention to the fireplace. Above it, a mantel clock ticked steadily, but something was off. It was stopped at 9:47 p.m. He exchanged a glance with Lisa. Power's still on. So why stop the clock? Ethan reached up, gently lifting the wooden case. The answer made his jaw tighten. The battery compartment was missing. Not empty, missing. Like someone had deliberately taken it. Lisa exhaled sharply. Someone didn't want to hear the ticking. Ethan frowned. It was a small detail. Too small. Why would an intruder take the time to remove the clock battery? Unless they were waiting here long enough to be bothered by it. A chill ran down his spine. 3. The dining room. A half-eaten meal. They moved further into the house, past the kitchen and toward the dining room. Here, the strangeness continued. The Whitmores had been in the middle of dinner. 2 plates sat on the long wooden table. Half-eaten steak. Asparagus, still glistening with butter. A bottle of wine, uncorked. 2 glasses, one empty, one barely touched. Ethan ran a finger along the rim of the second glass. It was dry. This meal's been sitting here for a while, he murmured. At least a few hours. Lisa frowned. So they were interrupted mid-dinner. But there's no sign of forced entry. Ethan's gaze drifted toward the patio door. Unlocked. Slightly open. A slow, creeping dread settled in his gut. Someone hadn't broken in. They were invited. 4. The dog, the silent witness. A rustling noise made Ethan turn sharply. In the corner of the dining room, the Whitmore's dog, a golden retriever, was curled up, motionless. For a moment, Ethan's heart clenched. But then the dog lifted its head, watching him with wide, fearful eyes. Lisa sighed in relief. Jesus, I thought it was. She stopped mid-sentence. Because Ethan was crouching now, examining something on the dog's fur. Something dark, sticky, matted near its paws. Blood. Lisa's expression hardened. Where's the body, Ethan? He didn't answer, because he was asking himself the same thing. 5. The hallway. Footsteps that shouldn't be there. They moved down the hall, toward the bedrooms. The floorboards were old, creaking softly beneath their steps. But when they stopped walking, the creaking didn't stop. Lisa tensed. Did you hear that? Ethan nodded, drawing his gun. A single slow, deliberate footstep echoed from further down the hallway. They weren't alone. Someone else was still in the house. The creaking sound stopped. For a long, breathless moment, Ethan and Lisa stood frozen in the hallway, listening. The house was still. Too still. Then, a shuffle. A whisper of movement from the far end of the hall. Lisa's grip on her gun tightened. Ethan signaled for her to hold. Wait. His instinct screamed at him that whoever was inside the house wasn't just some random intruder. No forced entry. A half-eaten dinner. Something deeply personal was happening here. And Ethan had seconds to decide what to do next. The split-second decision. His mind raced. Standard protocol? Call for backup. Secure the perimeter. But Ethan knew, if they waited, whoever was inside could disappear. His gut said this wasn't just a home invasion gone wrong. The dog covered in blood. The silent, eerie precision of the house. The missing clock battery. Whoever was here hadn't planned to leave in a hurry. He exchanged a look with Lisa. They'd worked together long enough to communicate without words. We move in, carefully. No rushing. Lisa nodded, her expression tight with understanding. Ethan took a slow step forward, his heartbeat a heavy thud in his ears. Another creak sounded ahead. A shadow shifted at the end of the hall. And then, a voice. Soft. Shaky. Please don't shoot. The face in the dark. Ethan's finger tensed on the trigger. He lifted his flashlight, the beam slicing through the darkness. A woman stood in the doorway of the master bedroom. Barefoot. Pale. Eyes wide with fear. Her hands trembled as she raised them in surrender. Ethan barely recognized her at first. Then it clicked. Rebecca Whitmore. The woman who was supposed to be missing. She was alive, but there was blood on her hands. And she was alone. The moment of truth. Rebecca, Ethan said carefully, keeping his tone low, steady. Are you hurt? She shook her head. No, I don't think so. Lisa took a cautious step closer. Where's Daniel? Rebecca's breath hitched. She cast a glance over her shoulder, toward the dark bedroom behind her. A single lamp cast a dim glow over the bed. And there, a motionless figure. Ethan's pulse surged. Rebecca, is he alive? For a second, she hesitated. Then, slowly, she shook her head. Her voice cracked. He's dead. Ethan exhaled sharply. The missing body wasn't missing after all. And Rebecca? She was the only one left standing. Does he arrest her? Or hear her out? Ethan's training screamed at him. Secure the suspect. Cuff her. Read her rights. But something stopped him. The way Rebecca wasn't running. How she didn't try to deny it. The look in her eyes, somewhere between terror and relief. Lisa's voice was firm. Rebecca, did you kill your husband? Rebecca swallowed hard. Then, she nodded. Silence filled the room. Lisa's stance shifted. Her fingers flexed on her gun. Ethan knew they were at a crossroads. This was the moment. He could follow protocol, restrain her, call in. Or, he could listen. The truth comes out. Rebecca. Ethan's voice was softer now. Tell us what happened. Tears welled in her eyes. He wasn't the man everyone thought he was. Her voice shook. He was cruel, controlling. He would hurt me and then act like it never happened. And tonight, she looked down at her trembling hands, still stained red. He said I wasn't allowed to leave him. That if I ever tried. Her voice broke. He'd make sure I never left at all. Ethan felt a cold weight settle in his chest. This wasn't murder. This was survival. Rebecca Whitmore hadn't killed her husband out of hate. She had killed him to escape. And now, she was standing before them, hands raised, ready to face whatever came next. The final choice. Ethan's grip on his gun loosened. He glanced at Lisa. She held his gaze for a long second, then gave him a single, barely perceptible nod. They weren't here to be executioners. They were here to seek the truth. Ethan lowered his weapon. "We're going to call this in," he said. "But first, you're going to tell us everything." Rebecca let out a shuddering breath. And for the first time that night, she nodded. The room was silent except for the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Ethan had noticed it earlier, missing a battery. Now, it felt like the only thing grounding him in reality. Rebecca Whitmore sat on the edge of the bed, hands still trembling, the ghost of old bruises faintly visible beneath the fluorescent lighting. Lisa had stepped out to radio for backup, but Ethan stayed. Not as a cop, as a human being. Rebecca had just confessed to killing her husband. A confession that should have been met with handcuffs. A Miranda warning. Cold, clinical procedure. But Ethan couldn't bring himself to do it. Not yet. Because this wasn't just another case. This was a woman who had fought for her life. And Ethan knew, deep in his gut, that if she hadn't acted first, she wouldn't be the one breathing right now. A different kind of justice. Rebecca's voice was barely above a whisper. "What happens now?" Ethan exhaled slowly. That was the question, wasn't it? Lisa re-entered the room, her expression unreadable. "Units are on their way." Rebecca flinched. Ethan saw it. The tightening of her jaw, the way her nails dug into her palms. She wasn't afraid of going to jail. She was afraid that no one would believe her. And Ethan knew why. How many times had the justice system failed women like her? How many times had people turned a blind eye until it was too late? Not this time. Not if he had anything to say about it. The story she never got to tell. "Rebecca," Ethan said carefully, "I need you to tell me everything. Not just what happened tonight, but what happened before. From the beginning." She hesitated. Then, for the first time, she looked him directly in the eye. And she told him how Daniel had started small, little insults disguised as jokes. How he controlled what she wore, who she talked to. How he'd cut her off from friends and family so gradually, she barely noticed until it was too late. How, when she tried to leave the first time, he'd laughed in her face. The second time, he broke her wrist. And tonight, he had come home early, drunk, angry. He told her she was his, that she could never leave, that if she ever tried, he'd rather see her dead than let her go. And when he reached for the knife, she reached first, the choice that defined the moment. Ethan's jaw tightened as he listened. This wasn't premeditated murder. This was self-defense. And now, Rebecca Whitmore was sitting here, hands shaking, ready to accept whatever fate had in store for her. Lisa shifted beside him. Ethan didn't have to look at her and know she was thinking the same thing. Rebecca had spent years being silenced. It was time someone listened. Breaking the cycle. The sirens were getting closer now. Rebecca straightened, bracing herself. Ethan studied her, the quiet strength beneath the fear. The years of fighting to survive. "Rebecca," his voice was steady. "You fought for your life tonight. That matters." Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "It doesn't change what I did." Lisa spoke then, her voice gentler than before. "No, but it changes why you did it." A long pause. Then, Rebecca exhaled, something in her posture loosening. Like for the first time in years, someone actually saw her. The flashing lights spilled through the window. It was time. The aftermath. The news spread fast. Small towns had long memories and sharp tongues. But this time, the whispers weren't about scandal. They were about justice. The people who had ignored Rebecca's bruises now spoke up in her defense. The women who had once been afraid to share their own stories came forward. And when Rebecca stood trial, she wasn't alone. Ethan sat in the back of the courtroom that day, watching as the jury deliberated. The verdict? Not guilty. Self-defense. The moment the words were spoken, Rebecca let out a breath that was almost a sob. For the first time in years, she was free. And Ethan? He knew this was the reason he became a cop. Not for power, not for control, but for this. For making sure that the next woman who cried for help was heard. Final reflection. Ethan never forgot Rebecca Whitmore. Not because of what she had done, but because of what she had survived. And when he patrolled the streets at night, he carried her story with him. A reminder that justice isn't always black and white, and that sometimes saving a life means choosing to listen,